Dr. Bouhania Qawi, who is Professor of Political Science and International Relations and the Dean of the Faculty of Law and Political Science at the University of Ouargla in Algeria. His research focus is on state transformation. He holds a PhD with distinction in political science from the University of Algiers and the University of Paris 8, which was a joint supervision program. His research interests have started recently to focus on governance and transparency in relation to the various transitions in the political and security fields. His scholarly publications include a book entitled The Management of the Security Problematic and Geopolitics in Africa. This was published in 2018. He's also contributed to the establishment of PhD and MA programs and is currently supervising a research unit on the issue of transitional justice in the Maghreb countries and a research team in the field of political transformation in Algeria. He's the editor-in-chief of the journal Booklets of Politics and Law, and in 2013 he was chosen by Urdu Telecom and the ICRA Association as an influential national figure in Algeria. Dr. Qawi is the recipient of several research awards in Algeria and elsewhere, and serves on the jury of international academic institutions. Please welcome Dr. Qawi to the podium. Oh, I should say, and I must apologise for the previous two speakers, I didn't mention the titles of your presentations. Dr. Qawi's presentation is entitled Universal Ethics and Global Environmental Governance. What impact does their absence have for international environmental management in Africa?
Thank you very much. شكرا لك السيد الرئيس على التقديم وشكرا للزملاء الذين.
I would like to thank the chairman for his introduction. I would like to focus on the security dilemma in Africa and managing this dilemma thereby. I worked on that dossier and I would like to link this with the Western pragmatic perspective and the local one. I would like at the outset to allude to the fact that we had surveyed more than 900 agreements that are pertinent to the environmental side, and most of them are not legally binding. The second part of the paper is to do with the security dimension. There is a very important point that relates to what we call the environmental security, and the African countries indeed are fragile in this regard because the environment is degrading, and there's also what we call the environmental related crimes. Since 2016 up to this moment, annually speaking, it costs between 90 and 300 million American dollars. That means there is a dent in the sovereignty of Africa, and indeed there are plenty of encroachments environmentally wise in the continent, in the African continent. There's the Paris Agreement in this regard. The USA, along with the Trump administration, withdrew from. I would like also to allude to a number of components that relate to the environmental dossier in Africa. First, the UNEP said that the African countries would face a financial gap in terms of the mitigation and the adaptation environmental procedures up until 2030, and this gap will be yawning. The Paris Agreement alluded to a number of intractable problems in this regard in the African continent. There's also a vulnerability in this regard, and perhaps there is a missing link here for the researchers, or what we call the environmental refugee status, or the refugee phenomenon that relates to the environment rather than the economic one or the political one. The Africa has plenty of problems in this regard, and or despite the fact that there were plenty of conferences that focused on these phenomena. However, the superpowers did not meet the objectives or the promises. Africa has become the most fragile continent, and as you know, every single year we have to listen to plenty of reports that deal with development, deal with security, deal with poverty, and so on and so forth. And Africa, unfortunately, lags behind. When it comes to the environmentally related refugee status, the number would be to the amount of 300 million by 2050, and this is what we call environmental refugees. And there is also the illegal, or perhaps the irregular migration. There's nothing that we call illegal. Using the word illegal is inappropriate here, so perhaps we need to talk about irregular migration. Some researchers think that the environmental displacement will be rampant in Africa, and the victims thereby are to the tune of 25 million. 10.5 million are IDPs, and Africa is exporting and importing destinations for refugees. And Sierra Leone tops the scales, 450,000, Somalia 414,000, Sudan 370,000, Burundi 300,000, and Angola 255,000, whereby the climate change affects indeed the immigrant or the immigration waves. To this end, there is a legal problem here, because when we talk about irregular migration, unfortunately, the international law doesn't talk about the immigration that emanates from environmentally related reasons. There's the wars, there is the crisis, there is a number of problems as well that led to the increase of the temperature, and a study stipulated the fact that increasing temperature would lead to strifes to the tune of 50%. To this end, as well as I said earlier, I would like to talk about the Paris Agreement and then the Marrakesh Conference 2017, which provided us with a deeper concept, and it emphasized meeting the promises of the donors. There's also other experts that talk about the most susceptible countries vis-a-vis climate change, and the African countries are the least capable of weathering the storms, and the Scandinavian countries are the most capable and ready for dealing with climate change. In accordance with the African Ministerial Conference on Environment, statistics show that 27% of the diseases in Africa relate to environmental causes: malaria, dysentery, as well as other diseases that represent 65% of the related problems, in accordance with some statistics, and the cost thereby of the pollution and the increasing temperature are indeed cumbersome, and this would entail the insecurity nuances as well, and the instability of certain countries. Some of the other problems
من المشكلات أيضا المهمة في قضية التلوث البيئي في إفريقيا يمكن أن نشير
we need also to talk about the nuclear waste and the pragmatic propensity of the superpowers in dealing with the security file in Africa, especially when it comes to the nuclear waste. What we call there are certain definitions in accordance with the Basel Convention. These are wastes that are not absorbable, cannot be diluted, and it affects acutely the health of humans. And these wastes are considered perilous if they are susceptible to be inflamed, if are susceptible to be interactive, erosion, and it has been noted that in Africa these elements are there and they are rampant, and the diseases thereby are being spread. Africa, as a matter of fact, receives nuclear waste and industrial waste from the Western Hemisphere, and this is what we might call environmental racism, which contradicts the right of all to enjoy a clean environment. Some secret deals were uncovered between sub-African countries and multinationals or Western countries, and this applies to the security companies as well. As you know, mercenaries are there in Africa, and think tanks are propelling this phenomenon. This can be compared with the environmentally related or waste-related issues as well. Kansai ship had had shipped 4 million tons to Haiti as fertilizer. However, it was a poisonous material. I would like just to provide you with 4 observations that are emblematic to the complicity or connivance of certain companies. Italian, German, and Britain companies were complicit in Nigeria in shipping wastes, and some fraudulent documents were used and 3,000 tons of carcinogens were put in this ship. In Guinea as well, there were certain deals to ship 15,000 tons of U.S. wastes to those countries. Cisco with Benin had agreed to ship 5 million tons of the hazardous waste to Benin. Fourth, a company called Probo Koala on the 19th of August 2016 to ship waste to Aguedo in Abidjan. And these are some of the observations that are emblematic to the fact that these multinational companies and the Western companies are in connivance with certain governments in Africa. 5 minutes left, so I would like just to jump perhaps on the conclusions. I talked about the environmentally related crimes, and there are 5. The first one is it relates to the wilderness. The other one is to do with cutting the trees illegally. The other one is to do with pollution. And when we talk about these crimes, we can talk about Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Guinea, Togo, Benin, Senegal, and other countries that are complicit in such crimes: Indonesia, Pakistan, China, Vietnam. The 5th crime is illegal mining. As the time is tight, I would like to move to recommendations, perhaps to have into place a global environmental governance. Here, I would like to talk about the three pillars. We'll talk about the public sector, the private sector, as well as the civil societies. These represent the three dimensions or the three sectors that ought to look at the matter and reach perhaps a governance that is global. One of the most important recommendations in this regard is to transform the UNEP to become an independent authority that has resources on a par with the UNESCO and FAO. Also to have this mechanism a permanent one rather than a temporary one, so that funding can be raised in accordance with the priorities and the agendas of the program. 3, to have the global mentorship mechanism being comprehensive. 4th, to ratify agreements in accordance or in a par with the European agreements, and globalization as well is a fact of life, and that's why the African countries must reach out for the other countries and to reactivate the CSOs, because the civil society organizations can play a major role in this regard in order to create incentives and positive impetus, because the elements that are powerful in the society are to do with the civil societies. We need to support the civil societies, organizations that are local and global, in order to follow certain practices to preserve the environment in Africa and in the world. Thank you.